Welcome to the video Introduction to Conflict. We're going to be looking at some definitions, management styles, and cultural influences. This is meant to supplement and complement the material in the book, which looks at a different way that you might examine conflict management styles regarding the continuums of direct-indirect styles, as well as emotionally restrained versus emotionally expressive. First of all, a few myths about conflict. We tend to think that harmony is normal, but conflict is abnormal. That confusion is irrational, but clarity is rational and logical and preferred. And that conflict is undesirable. And these are myths because they're not always true. Here's a definition of conflict that I like. The two things I'd like for you to pay attention to are the fact that it involves two interdependent parties, meaning that these two parties, these two people, need something from each other. They are connected in some way. If there wasn't any connection, if they didn't need each other somehow, there really wouldn't be a conflict. And the other issue that I like for you to pay attention to is this idea of perceived difference in needs and values. Sometimes in conflict, there really is a difference in what each person needs or values or wants. But a lot of times it's just a perception of that. And when people start to solve a conflict, they realize they actually wanted the same thing. They just had a different means of getting there. I think most of us probably avoid conflict if we can. We don't like to jump in the middle or encourage conflict. But there are some benefits to conflict I want you to be aware of. First of all, it gives us the opportunity to strengthen a relationship. If we effectively manage conflict, we can have a better relationship with that person that we resolve the conflict with. And if we gave it our best shot and it still didn't work, we can gracefully end a relationship on a somewhat high note, knowing that we gave our best shot. It allows for creative expression of ideas. Effective conflict resolution also builds stronger communication. There's a chance to create change. So if you have a problem, say at work, you don't have to keep being in a rut and never getting this fixed. If you have effective conflict resolution, you can change. You can have a new way to do things that actually solves the problem. It gives us more flexibility and control over our lives. We are no longer victims of conflict, but we actually can choose to resolve it and to fix things. If the other person is fully committed to resolving the conflict and you are as well, you can have increased trust because you know the other person is trying very hard to come up with some kind of resolution. And finally, it gives us a little bit more confidence to deal with conflict. We don't have to run away the next time we sniff conflict in the air. We can try to deal with it knowing that we have done it effectively in the past. So the assessment you'll be taking will measure your conflict management style on a grid like this and giving you 1 of 5 styles that's your preference. If you look at this grid, you can see that it's measuring how high the concern for the goal is and how high the concern for the relationship is. And that's how you can place all 5 of these styles. So let's look at these in a little more detail. The avoidance style. This is where the person has low concern for the goal. They don't have high regards for their own needs or wants in this situation, and they don't even have a really high need or concern for the person in this particular situation, in this setting. They just want to avoid conflict at all costs. So some communication behaviors they may do would be to divert issues, postpone, hey, can we talk about this at a different time? Or withdraw, and they could withdraw from the actual conversation by just not saying anything, or they might withdraw completely by getting up and leaving. An example of this style would be the Japanese style, where they often will leave indirect hints, get up and leave, or just ignore the problem. So this style is really going to downplay their own needs and downplay the needs of others. The accommodating style is going to be where there's a low concern for their own needs or the goal, but there's a high concern for the relationship. So this person's main goal is to maintain that relationship at all costs. They want to keep things smooth and peaceful. So some communication behaviors they may participate in are giving in or allowing the other person to, quote, win. Now they may not see it as a win, per se, because they actually feel like that's going to be more beneficial for them too to keep the peace. So they're going to downplay their own needs and work harder to meet the needs of others. An example of this style might be the Zimbabwe style, where people tend to learn what the other person wants to hear before actually stating their opinion, so that you are, again, focusing on the relationship. The competing style, which is often called the controlling style, the dominating style, the forcing style, is going to have a high concern for one's own goal or one's own needs, but a low concern for the other person in this particular setting. So fight for what you want and don't care so much about what the other person's wanting. They're going to ensure that their personal goals are met at all costs, and they really see conflict as a win-lose situation. This is a struggle, and one of us is going to come out victorious and one is not. Some communication behaviors that they may participate in are controlling statements like either you blank or I'm going to blank. They might use of persuasion techniques, and even manipulation to get what they want. An example of this would be in individualistic cultures where they see things more competitively, like in the U.S. The compromising style is right in the middle of the grid, and that's because they have a medium-high concern for the goal, which is their own needs, and also a medium concern for the relationship. So they assume that a full win-win is not possible. We both can't walk away with this as complete winners. So I'm going to aim for the mini win, mini lose, meaning that I have to give up something, but I'm going to gain something in return. So some communication behaviors you might see here would be, again, persuasive techniques. They're going to look for a fast solution, maybe trades. How about if you take the night shift this time and then next week I'll take it? Right? So I lose a little because next week I have to take the night shift, but I got out of the conflict of schedule that I had for this particular week. So we often think of this as being one of the best styles, but just remember that you do have to give up something to get something in return. And a good example of this would be in the U.S., the law system, where we have a lot of plea bargains. I'll take less time if I plead this particular charge. Collaborating style. This is going to be where the person has a very high concern for the goal, but also a very high concern for the other person involved. And they're going to try to find the best strategy to resolve the conflict. Their main goal is to meet their own needs, but also meet the needs of the other person. And they see that conflict can be solved as a win-win solution where we both walk away happy. Now, it may not be, you may walk away with something different than you thought you would when you went into the conflict. Maybe you had an idea of how this could be resolved, but through discussion, through merging people's ideas, trying to gain commitment from the other, brainstorming all possible resolution ideas, active listening, and using assertive statements, you're going to find a solution that works for both people, even if it wasn't the original solution you had pictured when you first started resolving the conflict. An example of this would be in the U.S., we tend to think that the collaboration style is the best. We oftentimes try to look for the win-win solution. So let's talk briefly about what is the best conflict strategy. First of all types can be useful at certain times. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to recognize the importance of the goal for you, for the other person, the importance of the relationship, how much time you have to solve this particular problem, and the power of the people involved. Because sometimes you may think you'd really want to do a collaboration method, but maybe because of the power distance, no matter what happens, the boss is going to have the final say. So collaboration isn't really going to be the best method to use in that particular situation. Just keep in mind that no one style is better than another in every single situation. As I mentioned earlier, all types can be useful at certain times. One thing you can do to be better at conflict resolution is recognize your own strengths, which is what that assessment would have helped you do a little bit, and then improve your weaker areas. So if you're not as good at avoiding conflict, you should try to work on recognizing when that would be a good time to do it. Or if you're not as good at collaboration, maybe develop some of the skills, like working on active listening and assertive statements, that would help you be more of a collaborator. You want to make sure that you're not always relying on your preferred style in every single situation. In the U.S. conflict research, we tend to view avoiding and accommodating as negative styles, but yet collectivists often see them as really useful for saving face and maintaining harmony. So again, it just shows you that there are times that each style could be more useful. So at this point, I'd like for you to pause the video and think about when the avoiding, the accommodating, collaborating, competing, and compromising would be the best situation. Think of a setting or a type of scenario where that would be a really useful style. And then once you've done that, then continue the video to see my discussion of this. So the avoiding style might be useful when the parties need time to cool off. They just need to take a break and avoid the situation at that particular time. Maybe more information is needed. So by avoiding the conflict, you can go gather more information before coming back and deciding how to resolve it. Maybe there's situations where other people are more involved. It really doesn't involve you, and it really isn't a goal that you're interested in, and so other people should be left to deal with it, and you should not be joining into that conflict resolution session just because they drag you into it. I could see avoiding style being really useful when it's with a stranger and it's an issue that really has very little importance to you, like maybe say some kind of comment that somebody brings up at the grocery store line. That's going to be where it's not a person you might not ever see again and an issue maybe you don't really care about. Accommodating might be really useful when you realize that you are wrong, right? So you want to smooth things over. You want to keep that peace. I also would say accommodating is very useful when the relationship is really important. So let's say with family members that you are going to have your whole life to associate with, maybe in-laws, and you need to keep the peace with your mother-in-law, for example, and so you sometimes use accommodating methods. Also, if you want to save face, where you want to allow the other person to not be disgraced, accommodation might be useful. Collaborating is when you really want the different perspectives to come out through this process. You want to do it when there's a lot of time because you don't want to try to collaborate if you only have a 15-minute break where you have to resolve a particular conflict. Collaboration can be very useful in long-term relationships, like with a partner or spouse, where you want to have a positive relationship with a person, trust that you are looking out for their best needs and interests as well. And a good time to use collaboration is when you need to build consensus. Let's say an important decision is being made and everybody needs to be on board with that decision. Collaboration is very useful. Competing would be very useful when fast action is needed. Let's say there's an emergency situation and people arguing about how to deal with it, but somebody actually really knows the way it should be handled. It's not a time to discuss it and to collaborate or compromise. Somebody might just need to go in and make that fast decision. Sometimes it's useful when there's an unpopular decision that needs to be made. As people are discussing things, they realize that the real good solution is going to be one that not a lot of people like. So competing might be useful then. Maybe there's a group that just can't make any decision. They're going around and around and around. Somebody just needs to step in and make that decision. Could also be in a situation where it's like a parent and a child and they're arguing about something regarding their safety and you just need to nip that in the bud. Finally, compromising is a good solution or good method when you need a temporary solution. Hey, we got to fix this problem before the next shift starts, so what could we do? It also is good when people are flexible, so they're willing to trade and negotiate and so on. And it works very well when people are of equal power. It's hard to compromise when somebody's the boss and somebody's lower on the status rankings in the organization. There's not going to be a lot of compromise a lot of times, so it's easier to do when people are equal power and can make those kinds of trades.